Today's story is about girlfriend cheated with her boss's husband, just when Opus was thinking of marrying her and calling to ask her dad's permission. Can you believe it? Well, my friends, go to the story and listen to her tale. I first met Bob about 2 years ago. He walked into the restaurant where I worked as a hostess, and we talked while he waited for the rest of his party to arrive. He was tall, kind of thin but muscular, and had a great smile, but he was obviously kind of shy. I could tell even then because from the way he spoke to me, with indirect little compliments, not being able to look me in the eye, that he was interested. The more aggressive guys would have taken my constant rubbing on them and touching them and had me at their apartment already, but this was a refreshing change. This was a guy who wanted to actually get to know me, period. I'm cute but I'm not supermodel. My name is Brenda. I'm 5'4" and weigh about 160. I have a nice thin waist, thick gorgeous legs, long dark hair, and a killer smile. According to Bobby, my eyes, a deep crystalline green, are my best feature with my lips a close second. At least that's what he says. But whenever we made love, it wasn't my eyes or my smile he was grabbing and concentrating on. Anyway, as the night progressed, I could tell that Bobby wasn't comfortable there. The group that he was a part of was obviously his co-workers, and though his work was praised several times, he just didn't seem to be that into the whole party thing. So I decided to rescue him. I approached their table and told him that he had an emergency phone call. He looked shocked and said that no one knew he was here. As he left the table, I followed closely behind him and ushered him into our employee lounge. "Where's the phone?" he asked. "Well, I began. You seemed a little uncomfortable, so I thought that I would get you out of there. If you want to go back, just tell them that it was nothing and continue with your party. But if you do want to leave, I'll go back and tell them that you were called away." "What do I have to pay you for doing this?" he asked nervously. I quickly wrote down my phone number on a piece of paper and said, "Call this number tomorrow and we'll see what happens." Bobby left the restaurant, and I went back to his table and explained that he had been called away. I didn't give a reason so that he could tell them whatever he wanted and there'd be no conflicts in our stories. The next day, Bobby called me and I wheedled my way into a date. We had so much fun that I didn't want it to ever end. He did things for me that the thin, pretty girls take for granted and bigger girls get only before we put out, if ever. He was a perfect gentleman and I loved the way he looked at me. Oh sure, I sometimes wished that he was a little more forceful, but I was crazy about him so it didn't matter. Our first kiss was great. He closed his eyes and placed his lips against mine with a gentleness that I still remember today. When we broke the kiss after what seemed like forever, but was probably only a few seconds, the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. This was my guy, and I was his. Update. Over the next few months, our relationship progressed at its own pace. We kissed more and often. We made out. And finally, long after I was ready for it, we had sex. I don't know why it took us so long, but it was great. I was kind of expecting to have him disappear afterwards like so many guys do. When Bobby showed up the next morning before he went to work, which had never happened before, I was expecting him to break things off since he'd had his ride. I almost tried to avoid him just so I could enjoy the glow from the sex for a little longer before the crushing blow. He looked so sad and then hugged me and gave me flowers and told me I was the most special thing he'd ever seen. I almost cried. I was so happy because I was just not used to this. A few months later, Bobby got really serious and scared, and I got nervous again. My mind told me that even this saint of a man had just gotten enough, big girl, and was ready to move on. "Just go ahead and say it," I told him. My voice was harsher than I wanted it to be because I thought I knew what was coming. "Brenda, I have a problem," he said. "So what's your problem?" "You want to skin your girlfriend, right?" He looked kind of shaken. "You mean after we duck, you what?" I asked. As you can see, I was ready, or so I thought. "Well, I don't want to leave you. I just want us to be together more. So I was hoping." Boom. "I know you're not ready to get married," you said, but my head exploded. Did he mention marriage? "I was hoping we could live together," he said. I was shocked. I knew I was pretty, and there were some men who liked my body. Actually, most men liked my body, but they only wanted it on a trial basis. Bobby, on the other hand, really loved me. I sat there with my mouth open. I was 27 years old, had probably ducked at least 15 or 20 guys. But I had never been anyone's girlfriend before Bobby, and now not only had he mentioned marriage, but he wanted me to live with him. Half the guys I ducked didn't even want to be seen with me afterwards, and this guy wanted me to be solely his, permanently. Over the years, as you can tell, I developed a tough skin out of necessity, but that night it disappeared. Our relationships did have one glaring problem, but it was minor. We were compatible in every way that matters, and rarely argue. He was content to spend most of his time just being with me. Of course, a lot of that time we spent in bed, but we were both happy, so who cares? Our biggest problem was Bobby's shyness. He almost hated to be around people. I'm not talking about parties. I'm talking about any group of people where he didn't know or feel comfortable with everyone there. It took him 8 months to build up the courage to meet my parents. When it came to going out with my friends or co-workers, well, I was becoming a hermit. For the most part, it didn't bother me. I was finally in love and with a great guy. I wanted all of my friends to at least see him once or twice. I'd tried on several occasions to make it happen, but there was always something that came up. Usually it would come up at the last minute, so he couldn't make it. I always ended up going alone or not going. Some of my co-workers were beginning to think the photo on my desk was a fake. I'd hear the meaner ones talking behind my back. Really, who would want to be with him, or those fat girls will say anything. So when Rochelle Davenport, our district manager, had a big party planned at her house, I put my foot down. Bobby, I said, if you can't manage to spend one evening with my coworkers for me, then maybe you don't love me as much as you claim to. Maybe this relationship has no future. I'll do it, he said sadly. The expression on his face told me that maybe I'd pushed him too far, but he'd agreed to it. So whatever, you're a great guy, baby. I just want to share you with my friends for one night, I said. You're handsome. You've got a great job, a great car, and my friends will love you, I assured him. So 2 nights later, Bobby dressed in a pair of dress pants and a jacket and waited for me on the couch in our living room. It used to be his living room, but we both live there now. It of course took me longer to get ready than it did for him to wash his 8 Mustang GT, shower, and get dressed. This was mainly because I was pulling out all of the stops this time. I wanted everyone to see me with my sweetie, but I wanted them to know that I was a beautiful, desirable woman. In short, for one night I wanted them to see me the way he did. When we got to Rochelle's house, as we got out of the car, all eyes were on us. First they looked at me. My dress was tight enough, but the thing that drew the most attention was my man. They'd all heard the stories of shy, reclusive Bobby, but most of them didn't believe he existed, and the few that did thought that there had to be something wrong with him for him to be with me. Most of them thought I was a trifle big, and the ones that realized that I was just voluptuous thought I was a whore. When Bobby came around and took my hand, the evening was sealed. Rochelle dragged her emaciated ass over to greet us almost as soon as we parked on her lawn. Her husband, I'd heard him described as a hot older guy, was with her. He was definitely older, but the hot part, not so much. He was a little too grandpa monster for me. He took my hand and welcomed me to their home. Their house was huge. It was like a European castle dropped into the suburbs. After Bobby and I made the rounds, which meant I dragged him around to make sure every single living organism at the party, including the pets, saw us together, he quickly retreated into the shadows in a corner. I wanted him to be more ducking outgoing for just one night. I had to give serious consideration to what my future would be like with him. Now that most of the guys there had seen me with him, and Bobby was kind of hot, maybe I could upgrade. Several of the women present had tried to make a run at him, and he quickly rebuffed their attentions. During the evening I noticed that whenever my glass was empty, Rochelle's husband was there in a second to refill it. By the time he offered to give me a tour of their house and the grounds, I was feeling no pain. As soon as we got upstairs away from the crowd, I noticed his hand on my ass, and it was no accident. I've heard a lot about you, he breathed into my ear. Like what? I asked. If it hadn't been for all of the liquor, I'd have moved his hand a long time ago. But the combination of liquor and frustration was amazing. Like maybe you'd be better with an older lion as opposed to a younger mouse. He leaned in and kissed me. It felt really good to have someone go after what they wanted. He didn't wait. He didn't ask. He just saw what he wanted and took it. My failure to stop him only led to him becoming even bolder. The next thing I remembered, he had me in a room upstairs on my back, making out like we were teenagers. We only stopped when someone opened the door and looked in looking for the bathroom. Hey, Brenda, your honey was looking for you. That tore it for me right then. Bobby couldn't even hold a conversation with a few people that were important to me for a few minutes. I locked the door and noticed that I felt kind of woozy as I stepped back towards the bed. I looked at the clock next to the bed. Had I really been away from the party for nearly an hour? The clock must be wrong. I wasn't that drunk. As I stretched out on the bed, I noticed that Phil was already undressed. Pretty sure of yourself, aren't you? I asked. Nope, just pretty sure of you, he smirked. I wonder what he meant by that, but I didn't have time or the inclination to figure it out. Old Phil pushed me down. The way he had me feeling right now was as if I was just some whore he'd picked up. But because I was drunk, and because it was so different, I decided to go with it for a while longer. This was so bad. The only thing good about it was that it was over quickly. I just laid there trying to figure out what I was going to do. I didn't want Bobby to know about this at all. Plus there was the problem of Rochelle. If she found out about this and didn't believe me, she might even fire me. So I just lay there and finally fell asleep. Update 1. The next thought I had was that there was someone talking. When I opened my eyes, I noticed that it was light again. That meant it was morning and I'd been here all night. Where was Bobby? How would I explain this? I heard the voices again. What did you say her name was again? Asked Phil in a loud whisper. It's Brenda. Now go get her out of here, replied Rochelle. Well, you invited her. Why can't you get rid of her? Winded Phil. You ducked her and left her here, so it's your problem. It's only my problem because her little boyfriend turned you down, said Phil. If he was here, he'd be my problem, so she's yours. But she works for you. Why can't you do it? Asked Phil in a quiet voice. You didn't seem to have any problem talking to her last night, said Rochelle. "Oh, you know how it is. Every once in a while you want a big one," she continued. "She wasn't even good though," whined Phil. "If I had paid anything, I'd want my money back." "Hey, her eyes are open. Go ahead," said Rochelle. At that point, Phil came over to the bed and I noticed that the daylight didn't do much for him. He definitely looked much worse in the morning. "Hey, Bonnie," he said, smiling. "Brenda," I said. "Whatever, I called you a cab. Shouldn't you get dressed?" He asked. I asked. "Oh, your honey boy. He left last night," said Phil in a frustrated tone. "Took one look at you sprawled out there and just ran out," he continued. "Several of the ladies at the party offered to go home with him, but no soap," he said. "Rochelle knows you ducked me." I asked. "Of course, we have an open marriage. That's the point of these parties, to try out different people and different things. They add a little fire to our relationship," he said proudly. "Actually, we hate each other so much, we couldn't even think about having sex," he said. "The only reason we don't get a divorce is because we'd be worse off alone," he said. "A pretty messed up relationship. That's why it's open," he said. "Well, I'm pretty sure it's messed up mine. It's going to take a lot to get him to forgive this." "I don't think he will," said Phil. "He seems like the true blue type," Phil said. "You know, like he was madly in love with you. Like you were he laughed his dream girl or something. I'm sure seeing you laying there with your legs all open just broke his little heart." He laughed again. I turned around and looked at him. "Why would you let him come in here?" I asked. "I didn't. Rochelle did." He turned her down flat and she really wanted him. "A lot of the women at the party did. But he wasn't having it. He said he loved you, and he's going to marry you." He laughed again. "So Rochelle brought him up here to show him that you've had no problem doing it, so he should too," said Phil. "She can be a really vindictive bitch when she wants something." He laughed. "So the two of you just ducked up my life for the fun of it." I hissed. "Hey, you're a big girl. A very big girl. You knew why we came up here," he replied. "You know what they say. A fool and her honey are soon parted," he smirked. "I got what was left of my clothes and put them on, and of course my dress was ruined and would no longer close. I found my cell phone in my purse. I called Bobby because I didn't want him to see me like this. It would only make things worse. I was hoping that he'd gone to work so I could slip into our place and fix myself up. Then I'd call him and be waiting for the confrontation when he got home. This would be our first major fight, but I was sure if I promised him it would never ever happen again. Maybe in time we'd get past this." Bobby didn't pick up. In fact, my call went straight to voicemail as if his phone was turned off. Bobby never turned his phone off. He always answered my call on the first ring. He was obviously angry. The cab arrived. I spotted Rochelle on my way out. I don't know what made me do it, but seeing that skinny woman standing there smirking at me caused me to have a temporary loss of brain function. So as I passed her, I just took a swing at her and knocked her flat on her skinny. I got into the cab holding my dress together and with as much dignity as I could muster gave the driver my address. He must have been trying for a big tip because he didn't say a single word to me. He just drove. Update 2. When I got to our building, though everything seemed normal, I felt a sense of dread. I looked around and didn't see Bobby's Mustang in our parking spot, so he wasn't here. That was a good thing, I thought. As I got to our floor, I saw that someone was moving in or moving out. There were a lot of suitcases lining the halls. They looked like our luggage, but then most suitcases really do look the same. I got my keys from my purse. Rochelle and her ducking husband hadn't heard the last of this, but first I had to straighten out my life. For some strange reason, I couldn't get my key in the lock. Maybe I was still slightly drunk. I concentrated and it just didn't fit. I stopped all the way down to the first floor to the building manager. Mr. Colte was home, luckily. I knocked on his door and the door opened. "Mr. Colte, there's something wrong with my key. I can't get in," I said. He didn't even open his door all the way, which was unusual. He was one of the most open, friendliest people we knew. "There's nothing wrong with your key, miss," he said. "Miss?" I wondered. When did I become miss? Then why won't it fit in the lock? I asked in my most polite tone. "Because the locks were changed at the request of the tenant of record," he said. "And in the middle of the night, I might add." I couldn't think. I started crying. And when he saw this, Mr. Colte just shook his head and closed his door. I called Bobby again and left a message for him. I told him how sorry I was and how he didn't understand what had happened. I told him that I loved only him and that I'd do anything to make it up to him. Then with no one else to turn to, I called my mom. Before she got there, I went back up to the hall outside the apartment and changed into some other clothes. She drove me back to her house without saying a word. As we got in, I guessed the silence was too much for her. "What did you do?" she asked. "What? A guy you barely know locks me, your own daughter, out of our apartment, and all you want to know is what did I do? Brenda, your dad and I aren't stupid. We know about the life you used to lead, and even though we only met him once, we really thought that Bobby was the guy for you. He loves you so much, and after he called us 2 days ago, we just assumed." "He called you?" I asked. "Yep, 3 times, she said. The first call he just hung up. I guess he didn't remember that with caller ID we knew who he was, but then he called back and it was the cutest thing I'd ever seen. So old-fashioned too, she said. "What was?" I asked. Well, he said that he was going to do something for you, Brenda. Something that he really was afraid to do, felt really uncomfortable with, but you really wanted it and you'd promised to do anything he wanted in exchange. We were thinking, oh my god, he's gonna make her do something really kinky. But he was calling to ask your dad's permission to ask you to marry him. Can you believe that? Nobody does that anymore. When she said that, I felt the tears well up and my chest got tight. The third time he called, he wanted to show me the ring he'd gotten for you, so I could tell him whether or not you'd like it. You'd have to be crazy not to. What did you think when you first saw it? She asked. Then I started crying, and my mom asked me again, what did you do? Brenda, please tell me you didn't turn him down. Brenda, I'm your mother and I love you, but you're not getting any younger. You're cute, but you may never get another offer this good. He's a really nice young man. He's handsome. He's got a good job, and he obviously loves you. That boy really thinks you're something special. Why wouldn't you marry him? She demanded. My mom's mouth dropped open as if she'd just realized something. That's why you've never brought any boys home to meet us. She stuck her hand over her mouth and looked at me and then said, you're a lesb. No, Mom, I'm not a lesb. I'm a slut, I answered. Then why haven't you brought any guys home? Sluts get lots of guys, she replied. Mom, they don't want a relationship with me. They just want to duck me. Bobby was the first one that wanted to stick around, I said. Then why didn't you want to marry him? Mom, it's a long story. Right now I just want to sleep. I called in and told my boss that I wouldn't be in for a couple of days. I thought I heard laughter in the background as I hung up. Then I called Bobby and left another message for him to please call me. I tried calling his job, but the lady who answered the phone asked who I was and after a moment asked me to leave a message. When I asked her if he was at work, she said that company policy forbid the release of any information about their employees. But just yesterday you told me exactly which restaurant he was having lunch at and gave me directions, I said. It's a new policy, she said. Then she told me to have a nice day, bish, and hung up. I called Bobby again and left yet another message. Then I tried to go to sleep, but I just couldn't get comfortable. I wasn't used to this bed and I wasn't used to sleeping without him. I couldn't believe how much I missed him wrapping his arms around me. Finally, I drifted off to sleep, but it didn't last long. Then I heard my cell phone ring and woke up. I tried to get to the phone before it stopped ringing, but I couldn't find it in time. I dropped the phone on the bed and it started ringing again. Hello, Bobby, I said into the phone breathlessly. Nope, it's Tina, said the voice. Tina was one of the women I worked with. She was more of an acquaintance than a friend, so I was wondering why the duck she'd be calling me. What do you want, Tina? How are you feeling, Brenda? Well, Brenda, seeing as how you've probably broken up with that Bobby guy, I was wondering if you'd be interested in making a trade. What the duck are you talking about? Well, a girl like you can't be too choosy, so I was thinking I'll give you my brother's phone number and you give me Bobby's. I hung up the phone. Tina's brother Matt was married and had 3 kids, 2 of them with his wife, another with one of their teenage neighbors. Final update. Did everyone know about last night? I called Bobby and left another message. This made the 10th one I left. I wondered whether he was listening to them and just didn't want to call me back, or if he just hadn't get the messages yet. I called the number for his voicemail service and entered his security PIN number. I listened to all of his messages. Most of them were from me, but there were 3 that got my attention. One was a message from the jewelry store that told him that he couldn't return the ring because it had been inscribed, but maybe they could cover the inscription or change it if he found someone new. The next was from one of those skanks he worked with telling him she'd seen him in his office, and she thought he looked like he needed cheering up, so she was asking him out to lunch or dinner, his choice. The bish even told him that if he chose dinner he could upgrade to the deluxe package that included breakfast at her place for no extra charge. I should walk over there and dot out of that bish, I thought. But it was the last message that really hurt me. It was from his mother and she told him that she loved him and she hoped he'd feel better soon. She told him that she understood what he had lost. But sometimes the best way to get over a bad situation was to start again. Then she told him about some floozy he used to go out with who'd been back from college for a couple of years, and that maybe he should give her a call when he felt ready. It seemed like the whole world was ready to write me off, but I was determined to put this behind us and get him back. I guess this is where I should start putting together my nefarious plan to get back at Phil and Rochelle for what they did to my relationship. But there was nothing I could do. Phil didn't want me because he really liked skinny women like Rochelle. Rochelle didn't care that Phil ducked me because she knew that every once in a while he just wanted to stick it to a big girl for a change of pace. I didn't ever want to see Phil again, and sex with him was revolting. It just made me miss Bobby more. I called Bobby thousands of times until one day he just changed his number and I couldn't get the new one. I tried waiting by the apartment, but he'd pull away every time he saw me and they wouldn't let me inside the building. I couldn't get in the building he worked in either. Then one day it happened. I saw the Mustang pull up and Bobby got out. He'd gotten his hair cut and he looked great. He hadn't seen me yet and he walked around to the passenger side. He reached in and a girl got out of the car. He took her hand and crushed my heart all in the same movement. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But the thing that hurt the most was the way she looked at him. She looked at him the way he used to look at me, and he gave her that look right back. I knew then that it was over between Bobby and me. There was no way I'd ever get him back. That was 3 years ago, and I still think about him now. I have a full life though. I go to work, still at the same restaurant chain. I got a bit depressed over Bobby for a while, and did pick up a bit of weight, so I'm no longer a hostess, but I'm the best dishwasher they have. Outside of work, I put in a lot of time posting ads. I know that there's another Bobby out there somewhere. I just have to find him. I also moved into an apartment right down the street from Bobby's place. It's not too close because I don't want to be accused of stalking them or anything. Besides, with my telescope I can see right in their windows. It's almost like I was there with them. I'm just waiting for that bitch to make a mistake. And she will, because she's only human. We can all be fooled or be a fool under the right circumstances, and a fool and her honey will soon part. Thank you for being a part of our journey, and we look forward to sharing more powerful stories with you in the future. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and stay connected with our community. Remember, this channel exists because of your support, and I want it to be a place where we can all come together, learn, and have a great time. Your feedback is vital, and I appreciate every single suggestion and comment you provide. Take care of yourself and see you soon. Second story. My boyf cheated on me for 28 months of our relationship. We began our relationship with a long-distance dynamic, as he pursued his undergrad abroad while I embarked on my master's degree. The introduction of a new group of friends with a higher ratio of guys to girls during my studies made him insecure. Consequently, he engaged in inappropriate conversations, including sexting and sharing explicit images, with a girl he met on Tinder before me. This wasn't an isolated incident, as there was another woman he had been involved with before me. During my Miami trip with the same group of friends, where I made a mistake while under the influence and promptly confessed, he experienced further insecurity and planned to meet this woman. I later discovered there were likely other instances of infidelity during the first year of our relationship. As time went on, he moved to a different city, and our relationship remained long distance. He downloaded Bumble, justifying it by claiming he wanted to explore whether he could find someone better, despite still being in a relationship with me. Upon my relocation to the same city, I caught him sexting the woman he had hooked up with earlier, again justified by his insecurities about our intimate life. Initially aware of only the sexting incident, I later uncovered a series of cheating episodes throughout our relationship. Despite being devastated, as I believed we were deeply in love, he has since put forth efforts to change. He acknowledges his insecurities and poor communication skills, sharing his shame with his mother and close friends. Personal and couples therapy has been initiated, and he's been actively reassuring and loving. While I love him deeply, I grapple with the understanding that his actions have transformed me from a cheerful person to someone profoundly anxious and mentally distressed. Despite contemplating leaving, he convinces me to stay, emphasizing his commitment to change. While his actions seem convincing, the challenge lies in reconciling his past behavior with his present willingness to transform. I find myself torn between waiting to see if genuine change occurs and the undeniable compatibility we share, characterized by a year of harmonious living together without conflicts. The complexity of the situation leaves me uncertain about the best course of action. Third story. My girlfriend of 10 months has been cheating on me for 6 of them. Hey everyone, hope your morning is going better than mine. Just discovered that my girlfriend has been deceiving and cheating on me for the past 6 months. I never thought it could happen to me, ever. I loved her immensely, and she assured me countless times that she felt the same. Well, turns out that wasn't the case. Throughout the past 6 months, she's been cheating and lying to me while consistently seeking financial help. I ended up emptying my entire bank account over the span of 6 months to support her through her struggle. I believed that by doing this, I would demonstrate my strength and dedication to her, showcasing how much I loved her. But it all came crashing down this morning when she revealed that she has been living with and intimately involved with another man. They share a home, a dog, and a life together. She apologized for taking so long to disclose this information and wished the best for me. Now I have nothing. I gave my all to her, and now I'm left with nothing. My mind is grappling with 3 conflicting options: cry and endure the suffering while struggling to piece my life together financially, as I'm now facing challenges in paying rent. Seek revenge. Do everything in my power to make her experience the same pain I've endured not just now but for the past 6 months. Retreat to isolation and wither away gradually. Food loses its taste, and the air doesn't feel the same. Any thoughts? Today's story is about found my wife taking STD tests, hired a pie on her, and divorced her. I, a 49-year-old male, have been married to June, a 38-year-old female, for 6 years. She is my second wife. My first marriage lasted 15 years, and we have 2 kids together who are now 22 and 19. They both are in college now. My first wife and I shared custody of the children, but they lived with her before moving out for their colleges. Not to delve too much into the details about my first marriage, because it was a smooth show until we both fell out of love and decided to separate. Instead of cheating and making each other's lives bitter, we separated, and the children were living with her. I used to visit them on weekends, and we usually spent the holidays together at our house, so it was all cool. Obviously, we both dated different people and introduced them to our children. She got married to her colleague 7 years back, and during that same time, I met my second wife June at a common friend's party. She was working as an assistant to a physiotherapist. We dated for a few months, and then she moved in with me. She wanted to get married, and I didn't see any problem with that. I had moved on a lot from my first divorce. My first wife had also gotten married, and my children were very open and accepting of June. We have a very normal relationship. June didn't want kids, and I was fine with that. I already had 2 from my first marriage, and raising them was already a task for me financially, though I earned decently. The soaring high school fees cannot be ignored. June worked for a year or so after the wedding, and then she quit and took up her passion for gardening. Anyways, that's all the context about our background. A few days back, June had to visit the passport office for renewal, and she was searching for some of her documents. She scavenged through all her document files and created a mess out of the closet. She was running late for her passport interview. She somehow put back stuff however she could and rushed. When she was gone, I thought of cleaning the mess and found an STD test report from months ago. It was quite shocking to me because June never mentioned taking that test. I tried to remember if we had anything unusual in that month, but nothing came to my mind. I kept that report aside, thinking to ask her directly when she returned, and started arranging the closet. After a while, I got a call from June asking me if I had left for work. I said no. Before I could say anything else, she asked me not to touch her closet and that she would come back and clean it up herself. I asked her why not. She said she doesn't like closet arrangements done by others because she doesn't find her stuff back. I said okay. She was still on her way to the passport office. Usually, I wouldn't have gotten suspicious of her request, but after finding that test report, this call made me doubt her intentions. I went through all the fields carefully, and in one of the old files, I found a stack of STD reports. Going through them, I realized that the tests were taken every 3 months, and the first test report date was 7 to 8 years ago, way before we got married or knew each other. It was just so shady and weird. I took pictures of all the tests and kept everything as it was. I even left the closet cluttered as she had left and also placed back the report where I had found them. I went to work and got a call from her again asking if I had left for work. I said yes. She didn't call me after that. When I went back home, she was there, and the closet was cleaned up already. She asked me if everything was fine, and I nodded yes. While having dinner, she asked me if I tried to clean up the mess she had left. I wanted to say no, but I realized that I had folded up a few of her clothes. I said yes, just a few of the stuff, but stopped when you called and asked me not to touch it. The panic was evident on her face, but she hid it wisely. I think she wanted to ask if I found something in there, but she resisted. Instead, she asked me if everything was okay because I was unusually silent. I said yes, everything is fine. I counter-questioned her, asking if there was anything that was supposed to upset me. She was taken aback for a moment with my response, but she just said no, nothing. I feel my answer has made her suspicious that I know about her secret. So basically, we both are playing mind games with each other. She's trying to find out if I know, and I keep her anxious until she confesses. To be honest, I don't know why I didn't confront her regarding those reports. I don't have any plans on how to proceed with this information or how to interpret this. I don't know why she's been taking these STD tests regularly. If I have to link this to her cheating, then does it mean she has been cheating on me forever? If not, why was she hiding this information from me? Did anyone face a similar situation with their partner? Thanks much. Update. Thanks for all the relevant links related to the STD tests. It was helpful. I also read all those cheating stories on Reddit involving STD tests, and one of the confessions helped me weave my plan to dig out the truth about my wife. It was a no-brainer, yet I never thought about that angle that it would work. I hired a pie on my wife and found some gut-wrenching truth. It came out that she was into regular hookups. She was actually kicked out from her last job as an assistant to a physiotherapist because she was hooking up with his patients. And a few of them, or rather their wives, complained that she was the one making advances on the men, following them on social media, asking them out for dates, and then obviously pulling them inside her skirts. Not only this, she was sacked from a few more jobs because of similar reasons. I don't know how these things were not caught in her background verification by her employers. Usually, they run a background check before hiring people. Anyways, how could I blame others when I myself fell into this trap? I too never ran a check on her before dating or even marrying her. Not trying to be a hero here, but it's true that she was the one who made advances towards me when we first met. Yes, I was attracted too, but she was an easy catch, that's what I thought. But actually, I was an easy catch for her. When we started going out, I even asked her why she was interested in me, seeing that I was divorced with 2 kids and 11 years older than her, whereas she was young and never had been married. She said she has a thing for older men, she finds them attractive. She feels very protected and secure to be with me. That made me feel good about myself. Honestly, now I realize if I should have taken this to be a red flag. God knows if this is the case, we have to go on suspecting everyone for their choices. Even with all the information in hand, I was still contemplating how to confront her. You see, we never had a problem in our relationship, apart from the fact that she was hooking up, which is obviously a deal breaker for me. I mean, I have read in other cases that the wife turns wicked and their behavior changes, and their relationship gets bitter before the truth comes out. But in my case, I never noticed any change in her, maybe because she had been pulling this off right from the start of our relationship. So, instead of running behind her and catching her red-handed, I laid down my cards in front of her. I printed out the STD reports I had shot on my phone and laid it in front of her and asked her about it. To my surprise, she didn't flip out. And her calmness actually freaked me out. She was more like, "Oh, you know, I had this feeling that you discovered these reports on that day. So if you have taken this long to confront me, I'm sure you have dug up the other details." I nodded. "Yep, I know everything." She asked me, "What's next?" She was upset but not remorseful. I asked her what was going on in her mind and why she cheated on me. Was I not enough? Her take on this entire thing creeped me out. She said she never considered that to be cheating. It's a part of her lifestyle. She does that without any emotional attachment. It's just for fun and to make her feel good. I asked her why she didn't tell me about this if she didn't consider this to be wrong. She said she was honest with her past boyfriends about this, but no one with serious feelings was ready to accept her secret life. She asked me if I would have let her do that outside of marriage. I said no, and I got my answer. She said marrying me gave her a stable life, and since I was older than her and already had kids, she didn't have to bear a child for me, and she could continue doing things in her fantasy world. For a moment, I felt she was suffering from some borderline personality or something. I even wanted to probe her more and suggest therapy or something. But then I backed off. I said I wanted a divorce because I consider this to be cheating. She was crying but not requesting forgiveness or reconciliation. She asked me about the maintenance, and I agreed to 6 months of maintenance and some additional money for her to set up a place for herself. She agreed and moved out. It was smooth but heartbreaking for me. This was my second marriage, and this too led to a disaster. While moving out, she was also crying and hugging me, apologizing for hurting me. But I resented taking her back. I just told her that she should have been honest about her sexuality, and it could have saved the heartbreak. She said sorry and left. I met my lawyer and discussed the matter with him. Since June and I have already decided and agreed upon the divorce terms, the lawyer assured me it shouldn't take long. The papers are on the way and will be shipped to her anytime soon. I told my children and my first wife about the divorce thing but didn't disclose the reason. They are asking me the reason because it all happened so suddenly. There were no perceivable problems in our marriage, and suddenly I told them that June had moved out, and we were getting divorced. So, obviously, they would freak out. To avoid their pestering, I have been telling them she too fell out of love with me and making a joke out of it. My first marriage also crumbled because we fell out of love, remember? So yeah, I'm just using humor to dodge the question around my second divorce. I don't know what the future holds for me, but now I'm pretty sure that I'm unlucky in marriage, and I'm not doing this again. Second story, caught my BF cheating. He doesn't know I know yet. This is a short story. In short, we've been dating for 7 months, and everything seemed great until he left for vacation with his best friend. While taking care of his cat, I stumbled upon his old iPhone, which we turned on and discovered still worked. Despite turning it off and putting it back, it continued to make noise, prompting me to check. Worried due to recent odd behavior and unsettling dreams, I found messages on the old phone from a sex app, starting right after he landed on vacation. Now, he's coming home in 2 days, unaware that I know. I've texted him about needing to talk, but he hasn't seen it yet. I'm torn between suggesting he takes an Uber to his apartment from the airport and meeting him to return his keys, or leaving behind the gold-engraved bracelet he gave me for Christmas and reclaiming my belongings from his apartment while he's away. Third straw, my GF of 2 years cheated on me with my friend. I find myself grappling with an overwhelming sense of heartbreak, an emotion entirely new to me. My girlfriend and I have shared nearly 2 years together, marked by recent difficulties. We've been inseparable during this time, deeply in love, and we are parents to our 6-month-old son. Recently, tensions arose, and we weren't getting along. Despite our love for each other, we decided that maybe some space was necessary to rekindle the missing spark. In agreement, I gave her the apartment for the night and headed to my mom's. Unfortunately, my mom, uncle, and sister lived together. Finding them intoxicated upon arrival, I stayed there, assuming my girlfriend would be asleep when I returned. Upon coming back, I discovered her watching Euphoria, a show we typically enjoy together. On the coffee table lay a set of keys, 2 Dr. Peppers, and 2 White Claws. I never thought such a situation would happen to me. I'd only seen it in videos. I casually inquired and carried on, trying to push aside any suspicions. She was acting oddly, and when I asked if she was upset about my early return, she responded with silence. Suddenly, she mentioned that a friend was in our kitchen, having come over just to smoke. My heart shattered at this revelation. Inviting him out, I asked if anything happened between them. Both denied it, and he left. She insists it wasn't anything and that nothing was going to happen, but I feel defeated and lost. Unsure of how to move forward or overcome this, my ex's hometown is an hour away. Her family is well off, and our own financial struggles complicate things. I can't maintain the apartment alone, leaving me in a challenging situation. I apologize if this comes off as a rant, and I understand it may not be the most engaging read. Unfortunately, I lack someone to talk to about these issues. My grandma passed away 2 months ago, and my girlfriend has been my support throughout the healing process, a process I'm still working on. Right now, I just feel incredibly lost. Molly Jacobs was your ordinary 15-year-old teen girl. That is, she was hormonal, perpetually rebellious, and always mad at her mother. Her mother, Linda, kept trying to control her and tell her what she did wrong, what she should be doing, didn't like her friends, didn't like the way she dressed. In short, a real control freak. Image was very important to Linda, and she tried to ensure that her family was thought of as being a class above the normal people in Northfield, MN, where they lived. Her mother wasn't very popular in high school, and wanted Molly to be one of the in people. Linda didn't listen to Molly, never asked her what was important to her, never wondered about her goals or ambitions, never seemed to ask how things were at school, didn't even know who her best friends were, but tried to control who she should hang around with and make friends with. These traits had really strained their relationship. And although Molly realized that her mom only Linda's best was not ever going to be Molly's best. Molly loved sports and the outdoors. Linda wanted her in orchestra and debate. Molly loved to be rebellious, had pierced her left ear in as many places as she could fit, and was contemplating a nose ring. Linda wouldn't hear of it, and wouldn't sign the parental permission required to get one. Molly wanted to dye her hair blue and shave it on one side, and Linda told her absolutely no. And if she did so, she would be grounded for weeks. Molly's dad, Jim or Jimmy, as everyone called him, on the other hand, was totally mellow, and had learned at a young age that you don't sweat the small stuff. He had witnessed his best friend Van go through struggles with his dad when they were growing up. His dad was a born-again Christian, which seemed to make him as hypocritical as a person could be. Maybe it was just his dad and not the Christians, but Jimmy was reserving his judgment on that. Van wasn't allowed to wear his hair longer and a bit wilder, as was the high school style. His dad gave him his haircuts, and always gave him a crew cut that looked like the landing deck of an aircraft carrier on top, and was shaved to 1/4 tars on the sides. After his haircuts, Van would have to go to school, and deal with the put-downs and crass comments that the school jerks would throw his way. And this got Van into a huge number of fights. And Van always had Jimmy's back. So, Jimmy had seen the effect on Van that little things that would be of no consequence in the future, like hairstyle, weren't worth arguing about and fighting over. In fact, Jimmy encouraged Molly to live her life as individually as she could as long as she wasn't hurting herself or others. No drugs, no sex, no bullying, no lying, no cheating, etc. If she wanted blue hair, Jimmy would say, go for it. If she wanted to pierce her nose, Jimmy would sign the permission slip. Jimmy was mellow, but the two hard and fast rules that he had was no lying and always show loyalty. He would tell Molly, you have to communicate your feelings. You have to speak up. You can't keep secrets. He would say, Molly, secrets have a way of burning a hole in your personality and your life. Secrets eventually get out. And if they fester too long, they do more and more damage by the time the secret comes out. His other rule, loyalty, was stated as being loyal and honest with your family, your friends, and yourself. You have to be loyal to your morals and ethics. You have to be loyal to your friends, coaching them to make the best decisions they can and supporting them. Because of these traits, Jimmy had a lot of friends, and that had helped him also earn a good reputation as a copyright lawyer. He was a partner in a high-tech copyright law firm, which kept him quite busy. But he always made time to see Molly's soccer and softball games, and any school activities that she would be in. He always made time to hike, bike, fish, kayak, and camp with her because he knew she was growing up fast, and one of these days soon she wouldn't be available to do those things with Jimmy. His wife, Linda, sometimes came along, but usually would pass on these outings, so Molly and her dad had formed an incredibly tight bond together, and Linda was somewhat jealous of it, but also didn't value the things they did as being the things that Molly should strive to do. Every Wednesday, Linda had the day off, and she would tell Jimmy and Molly that she would use that day to make and freeze meals for busy days, or catch up on the housework, or go shopping and maybe go visit her mother and father. Many times when Molly came home, she would see Jimmy's older brother Dan driving his. When she asked Linda if Uncle Dan was over, sometimes she would say no, which seemed strange because why else would his truck be on her block? Sometimes she would say yes, that Dan had come by to ask her about a landscaping project he was going to help them on, or to borrow some of Jimmy's tools, or to see if Jimmy was home to talk to him. It all seemed a bit strange to her, but her extended family was strange, if nothing else. Linda was home before Molly got off school at 5:30 after sports practice, and always home before Jimmy, which could be 6 at the earliest and up to 9 p.m. at the latest. This particular day at school, it was just after lunch, at about 12:30, when Molly started to get some bad cramps from her menstrual cycle. She asked the teacher if she could see the nurse and convinced the nurse to let her leave for the afternoon. She took out her cell phone and called her mother Linda, but the phone rolled right till she tried it once more and got the same result, so she left her a quick message. "Mom, I am not feeling great, so I am leaving school. It's only 10 blocks, so I'm going to walk. But if you get this message, can you pick me up? I'll take the Maple Street route home. Thanks." Molly walked home and never did get a return call from Linda. Guess she is working out, or shopping, or busy with something, she thought. Figures. She gets mad if I don't immediately respond to her calls or texts. But when I call her, nothing. When she came around the bend of the street on her block, she saw Uncle Dan's truck parked in the driveway. Guess he needs some more tools or something, she thought. So Molly came up the front walk, and the door was locked, which seemed a bit strange. But instead of ringing the bell, she took out her keys and opened the door. The first floor was dark, quiet, and when she walked back to the kitchen, no one was there. She dropped her backpack and looked out in the garage to see if Uncle Dan was raiding the workbench for tools, but it too was empty. When she came back in, she heard some moaning and panting coming from upstairs. She was intrigued and quietly walked up the steps and down the hallway to her parents' master bedroom. She peeked around the door jamb and was stunned to see her mom, Linda, on her knees with Uncle Dan beside her. Both of them were moaning. She quickly backed out in shock and tears. She didn't know what to do, but as the anger at the betrayal of her uncle and her mom to her father Jimmy, and to herself sunk into her brain, she got mad. Very mad. She peeked around again, this time with her phone and her video camera on. Molly walked into the room and shouted, "How could you do this to our family? And you, Uncle Dan, you screwed your own brother's wife. I hate you, both of you." Both Dan and Linda looked over, confused that someone was there, and then recoiled in horror when they saw Molly filming them and screaming at them. Molly turned and ran down the stairs. Linda screamed, "Oh my God, no, Molly, no, please come back. It isn't what you think. Please, Molly, come here and talk to me." She ran down the hallway after Molly, but Molly was fast and out the front door before Linda was even off the landing at the top of the stairs. Linda came running back and screamed at Dan, "Get dressed and get your truck started. We have to catch her. We have to convince her not to tell Jimmy. It will destroy him and he will kill us both. Hurry. Oh God, what have I done?" She broke into sobs and tears and Dan yelled, "Okay, you can cry and have your guilt attack later, but get dressed and let's go." Molly ran down to the end of their block across the street and through the backyards of the next 3 blocks. She didn't know what to do. Her cell was ringing and she looked down to see Linda calling her. She let it go until it stopped and a minute later it rang again. She didn't answer it, and it went to voicemail. She decided to run the 1 mile over to the 9 Mile Creek nature trails. Her dad and she would hike and jog on these trails, and they had a favorite resting place that sat on a rise by the bank of the creek. It was a spot in between 5 massive cottonwood trees that formed a little grassy spot naturally fenced off from the trail behind the tree. Her dad and her called it our trees, and sometimes they would race each other down the trail to see who could get there first. Molly got behind the trees, sat down, and put her head on her knees and started to cry. How could her mom do this to her dad and her? How could Uncle Dan cheat on Jimmy, his brother, with his wife? She wailed as the tears flowed in streams down her cheeks. She kept ignoring the calls from her mother. She didn't want to talk to her. Not now, and probably not ever again. She was in distress, and when that happened, she always reached for her dad. By this time, Linda had been calling Molly several times, with no response. She did see and picked up Molly's voicemail about not feeling well and leaving school and looking for a ride. Linda had been kissing and fondling Dan on the coach when those calls came in. and she ignored them, figuring they were likely Jimmy just calling to check in, and the last thing she wanted to be interrupted by was a call from her husband. She was already feeling the mixture of guilt that rode heavily along with the feeling of lust and the excitement of doing something wrong in secret that added a thrill to her life that she really couldn't seem to say no to. She had been screwing Dan behind Jimmy's back, and on Wednesdays for about 10 weeks now. She knew it had to end, knew it was getting in the way of her relationship with her family, knew that it would be a total disaster for her marriage if she was ever found out. But she just hadn't worked up the strength to cut Dan off and give up her secret guilty and risky danger. She would rationalize that no one really needed her anymore, and that this was something just for her that would never hurt Jimmy. She wouldn't let it get in the way of her marriage, although she didn't seem to realize that it had been putting up an emotional barrier in bonding with her family, likely due to the guilt or what she was doing. If she had only made herself think through the likely outcome, how could she be so stupid to jeopardize everything that actually meant anything to her? Now she hated herself for what she had done. Or maybe she only hated the fact that she had been caught. She didn't have time to analyze all of that now, but dreaded that she would have to dig deep to figure out why the hell she had taken such risks. Now, with her daughter calling her out and running off, it really started to sink in on how so many people could be hurt by her actions, including herself. She never did understand how she let this happen. She loved Jimmy and Molly more than anyone else in the world, and she realized that she was letting her end of the marriage deteriorate with this affair. But she just couldn't seem to control the lust and excitement she got by indulging in this, her secret vice just for herself. But now she couldn't bear to think about what would likely happen to her family and how she might have just destroyed the man and daughter she loved and thereby destroyed herself. She kept frantically calling Molly's phone and trying to leave messages to convince her to talk to her and not to let Jimmy know what she saw, as it would destroy him. Molly continued to ignore Linda's call and decided she had to call her dad. She rang him and he picked up on the second ring. "Hey, little rebel woman, what's going on? Aren't you in school? Are you okay?" Jimmy heard the sobbing and sniffles of his daughter, who was clearly in distress on the other end of the line. "What's wrong? What happened? Are you hurt? Where are you? Where is your mother? Dad, please come quickly. I need you. I am at the trees. Don't tell Mom and don't take any calls from her before you get to me. Please." "Molly, why? Did you and Linda have a big fight? Are you okay? What's going on? Just do it, Dad. Just come quick. No calls to her from Mom. Please, please just do it. I'm okay, but I need you now." "Okay. You keep safe and don't move. I'll be there as 20 minutes. Jimmy flew out of his office, and not wanting to take the time to explain anything to his executive administrator Beth, he just told her, "I'm gone for the day. Got a client having a meltdown, so got to run. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow." He ran out of the building to his Porsche SUV. Partners enjoy some luxuries to compensate for all the hours and the stress. His cell phone started ringing again, and he saw it was Linda. He didn't answer, as he had promised Molly he wouldn't. It stopped, and then instantly started again. He let it go to voicemail, as he fired up the Porsche and tore out of the parking lot in his rush across town to the nature center. He pulled into the parking lot, jumped out of the car, and in his suit, tie, and dress clothes, he ran down the path until he saw the trees. He ran up the bank and into the little tree enclosure, and there was Molly curled up into a ball and crying. "Molly, Molly, please, what is wrong?" She threw herself into his arms and hugged him and cried louder, and her body trembled as she sobbed. He stroked her hair and her back, and after 3 or 4 minutes, she settled down. "Molly, did someone hurt you? What is wrong? Did you and Mom fight?" As he said this, her phone, lying on the ground, had another call, and he saw it was from Linda. He also noticed when he picked it up that there were 10 missed calls from Linda. Shortly after her phone stopped ringing, his started, and it was Linda. He was going to answer it, and Molly said, "No, Dad, don't answer that. We need to talk. Dad, I don't know what to do. You always told me to tell the truth, to be loyal to family, not to hold secrets as they eat you up from the inside. But what if the truth is worse? What if the truth destroys people? What happens then, Dad? It's better to get the ugly truths and pain into the open where your family and friends can help you, can support you, and can deal with it. Okay, Dad. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. Has Mom been calling you? If so, did she leave a voicemail? Please play it back." Jimmy looked at her strangely, but opened up his phone and played the voicemail from Linda. "Jimmy, I need to talk to you. Molly and I got into a fight and she ran away. She is clearly upset, and I don't think she is clear on what she saw that got her so upset. I am looking for her. Can you call me and give me some ideas on where she might be, or can you call her and tell her to call me? Jimmy, please know that I love only you and Molly, and I always will." That seemed like a really odd way to end the message, but Jimmy put that aside and looked at Molly. Molly let out a sarcastic growl when she heard the message. She said to Jimmy, and in it, you could hear Linda sobbing as she said, "Molly, it's not what you think. It isn't anything, just a harmless and meaningless act. Please call me and talk to me about it before you do anything stupid. Please talk to me before you talk to your dad. Again, Molly said, "Yeah, right, just a harmless act." Jimmy looked at her confused and said, "What's going on, Molly?" Molly said, "Dad, just bear with me. Let's play this next voicemail from Mom." She hit the play button, and Linda sounded like she was pleading and begging as she said, "Molly, please talk to me. Don't tell anyone, especially your dad. It will destroy him and our family." At that, Molly jumped up and spit out her anger, saying, "Yeah, screw you, Mom. You're putting this on me that I'm destroying the family. What a crock. Boy, that takes some nerve to lay this on me." Now, Jimmy was really confused and said, "Molly, you've got to tell me what's going on. Out with it." Molly said, "Dad, are you sure? You heard her. It's going to destroy our family, although I think Mom already did that anyway." Jimmy looked at her and said, "Molly, you can't come this far and not tell me. Out with it. What's going on, for God's sake?" "I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't feel well at school, so decided to go home and called Mom a few times for a ride, but her phone was turned off. I walked home and Uncle Dan's truck was in the driveway. The front door was locked, so I unlocked it and went in, and no one was on the first floor, and then I heard noise coming from your bedroom, so I quietly walked upstairs. I'm so sorry for you and me and our family, Dad. Here, you better watch this video, I guess." She handed her dad the phone and put her head down on her knees and started to softly cry again. Jimmy pushed play on the video, and the whole shocking, disgusting scene that Molly had witnessed played out in full color and sound. It was short and ended with Molly's cry of anguish and her verbal shaming of Linda and Dan that broke them out of their carnal bliss. The look on both their faces as they saw Molly standing in the doorway was very hard to look at. It was a mixture of pleasure, quickly dissipating, then of shock, fear, shame, guilt, anger. It all mixed into a study of human emotion in less than 5 seconds of screen time. And now his head bent over to his knees and the tears started to fall. Why, God, why? How could she do this to us? And with my brother, how could they betray me like that and disrespect me like that? He couldn't bring himself to say more. Molly slid over close to him and put her arm around his shoulder and said, "I'm so sorry, Dad. I feel that same betrayal and shock. I never want to see either of them again. I hate them for doing this to us, to you, and ripping the family apart." By this time, Linda hadn't been able to get any return calls from Molly or her husband. She called his office directly, and his admin could only tell her that he ran out quickly to see a client and said he wouldn't be back today. She said she would take a message and offered to call him and make sure he knew his wife was desperately wanted to talk with him. Linda mumbled no thanks and hung up. Dan and Linda gave up with the idea they would find her by driving around in his truck, so he returned to the house and stopped in the driveway. The house was dark, Jimmy's car was not there, and it was doubtful Molly had returned. Dan looked at her and said, "Well, Linda, I am hoping that Molly doesn't do anything rash and foolish. I hope she doesn't talk to Jimmy. You know that he will never forgive us for this. I guess I need to get home before Amanda wonders where I am. And I guess I'll just keep my head down and see what happens. Darn it, why were we so foolish?" Linda looked over at him, and she could barely talk through her sobs and tears. "Drop me off, Dan. I have to think about what I will tell Molly. I have to get to her before Jimmy finds out. I have to convince her that this meant nothing. That if she tells Jimmy, our lives will be destroyed." With that, she again called Molly, and it again rolled to voicemail. She cried into the recording, "Molly, I am so sorry. Please understand this meant nothing and it is over. Please call me before you talk to anyone. Please don't tell Jimmy. It will destroy us all." With that, Linda got out of the truck and walked back into the house. She called out for Molly, knowing that there would be no answer. She ran up to the master bedroom and stripped off the sheets, picked up her strewn clothes, and put new sheets on the bed. This had been her Wednesday afternoon routine. After Dan left for the last 10 weeks, she sat down on the bed and cried. Why did I do it? Why would I risk my marriage and the respect of my family for this? If she thought about it, she didn't even like Dan that much. Certainly didn't love him. Her love for Jimmy had never lessened, but she looked back at her behavior and saw how she had emotionally started to push him and her daughter Molly away. When did she stop having open and loving conversations with Jimmy? When was the last time she even made love with him and showed him any meaningful affection or connection? What the hell was wrong with her? She thought about it long and hard. I guess a lot of it has to do with the excitement and the thrill of doing something behind my family's back that is only for me. It was so wrong, but that partially made it so thrilling. And my life is so boring. And it seemed to her that no one needed her anymore. Molly didn't need her. And with Linda's attitude, Molly had detached herself and severed her open and loving relationship with Linda. Jimmy didn't need any excitement. He had it all at a fast-paced law career that didn't leave a lot of time for her. The time he had, he directed at Molly, especially since she had pushed him away emotionally. He knew their sex life was totally inadequate, but her had stopped trying to ask Linda what the problem was and whether they should engage a counselor. She turned him down, told him everything was fine. It seemed to her that his response was to back away from her emotionally. And it seemed that Jimmy didn't need her, but she now understood this was her fault. Dan told her how sexy and attractive she was, and how he needed her. He couldn't find the same comfort and feelings from his wife Amanda as he got from Linda. And with Amanda 6 months pregnant with their second child, he wasn't getting much attention at home. Their flirting and his constant comments about how beautiful and desirable she was eventually led them to some necking and caressing, and it was only a matter of time before it turned into all-out lustful sex. But now Linda remembered the look of hurt, pain, disgust, betrayal on Molly's face. Molly had called her a cheap woman, and she couldn't disagree. Then she also thought about Amanda, about Dan and Jimmy's relationship, about their parents. And her parents. Why am I only understanding now how hurtful and horrible this has been? I have destroyed my life and did it without even thinking about the possible consequences or why I did it. She fell over on the bed and curled up into the fetal position and cried until a fitful sleep came over her. Jimmy and Molly had just stayed at the trees, intermittently crying and talking with each other. Molly said, "What are we going to do, Dad?" "Molly, I don't know what we should do. I have so much anger and feelings of pain at being wronged by the women I loved and shared my life with, but also by the big brother that I had grown up with and I thought would always have my back. And now you two are in the middle of this mess, knowing that our family life will never be the same again. I don't know if I can even look at Linda, much less forgive her, but she is your mom and you will always need to have a relationship with her, although that may seem hard to understand right now. But for now, let's just go get a hotel room and try and calm down, rest up for the night, and deal with what we are feeling tomorrow." With that, they drove downtown and booked a suite at the Hilton. Jimmy's idea was that he would work from the suite tomorrow, and he would call into the school office and tell them Molly was sick. They could do that for a couple of days, and then decide what to do over the weekend. Jimmy would go to the house and get their clothes and toiletries, enough to get them through 3 or 4 days while they decided what course of action to take. Jimmy also called his friend Jack Wilson, who was a district attorney for the city, and gave him a brief account of what was going on. He told Jack that likely his wife would be filing a missing persons report in the next day or two, and asked Jack if he could squash that report and take no action, knowing that Jack reluctantly agreed, but told Jimmy he could only hold it off until the coming Monday, so Jimmy had to have a conversation and plan with Linda before then. Molly and Jimmy checked into the Hilton and called up room service for burgers and fries, then turned on the TV and laid in their individual queen beds and watched TV like zombies until sleep finally took their thoughts away, if only for a few hours. Or from Jimmy. Oh God, no, she thought. Jimmy has to know, or he would have called or been home long ago. Oh God, what have I done? She again tried to call both Jimmy and Molly's cells, and both of them rolled immediately to voicemail, indicating they were turned off. She texted Jimmy and said, "Jimmy, I guess you know, but please know it meant nothing. And I only love you. I am so sorry, but you need to let me know that Molly is safe, and you need to come home and talk to me. Please let me explain." She really didn't know how or what she would explain to Jimmy. Would he want to know the details? Would it be better if it had just been that time and one mistake? She started to think about her story and what she would tell him. She waited until midnight for a callback or text response to her calls, and when there wasn't one, she crawled under the covers and tried to go to sleep. It was a fitful, sleepless night, full of tears and self-hatred for what she had done, and the hurt she knew she had caused. In the morning, Jimmy and Molly woke up early and went down to the Hilton's breakfast buffet. Jimmy called the school and said Molly wouldn't be in for 2 days, and also called work and said he would be working from home and on his cell if needed and his computer as required, but not to call unless he urgently had to address something. He looked at Molly and said, "And that you got pulled into this terrible situation. I guess you are going to enter adulthood and all the problems life can hand you sooner than I would have ever hoped. Here you are at 15, and I'm afraid that you are now going to see from an adult perspective how important those things are that I have been preaching to you. Loyalty, honesty, the truth, being true to your morals and ethics. As you can see, there are ugly things in life that are going to come your way, but you have to do your best to live by your own code of right and wrong. Mom, for whatever reason, has thrown that code out the door by her actions with your Uncle Dan, and once that trust and deceit is done, it can't be undone. I am going to have to consider what actions to take. And I guess since you are stuck in the middle of this, I am going to let you go ahead and be with me each step of the way and help decide what becomes of our family from here. To begin with, I am going to call Dan right now and find out what the hell is going on." Jimmy called Dan's number, and Dan picked it up and said, "Hold on, Jimmy. Let me step outside so I don't bother Amanda here. We are just getting out of bed." He ran down the stairs and out onto the porch and then said, "What's going on, Jimmy?" Jimmy's anger boiled over and he said, "What do you mean what's going on? I think you better tell me what's going on. I want you to tell me honestly with no BS why, when, and how long you have been screwing my wife." Dan immediately got quiet on the phone and said, "Jimmy, I am so sorry, man. It just happened, and once we started, we kept coming back for more. But it wasn't about you, Jimmy. And it isn't like we are in love and even interested in each other that much. It was strictly sex. It was only a physical relief and a momentary feeling of lust and excitement. I'm so sorry, Jimmy, but really, it meant nothing to either of us. Have you talked to Linda? I think you should be asking her these questions. I'm asking you, how long? Dan sheepishly said, the last 10 weeks, Jimmy. Every Wednesday, always at your house. Jimmy yelled out, why? Why would you betray me like that? Dan said, Jimmy, it wasn't about you. It just happened. I just was not getting much sex with Amanda being pregnant. And I was so attracted to Linda and started to pursue her, and eventually got her to kiss and fondle with me. And one thing led to another and then we ended up in bed. I'm so sorry. You need to forgive us and we can get by this, Jimmy. We both love you and don't want to see you hurt or your family broken up. Forgive you, huh, Dan? Listen, this is the way it is between me and you. I will never talk to you or visit you again. If I see you, you better run because I will kick in your face and your balls. You are now dead to me and I will never feel like I have a brother again. Dan began apologizing and protesting for Jimmy to be reasonable and not let it destroy their relationship. Jimmy, it didn't mean anything. It was only sex. It meant everything to me, Dan. You have destroyed my marriage and my trust, faith, and bond for both you and Linda. Do you have any idea what seeing that did to Molly? So, don't tell me it doesn't mean anything. What it means is that neither of you respected or loved us enough, not to put us in the worst pain possible. With that, Jimmy hung up and decided that was indeed the last time he would ever talk to Dan. Molly and Jimmy spent Thursday and Friday working from the hotel room and eating room service and intermittently sleeping, watching TV, and then going outside for a quick walk to get some air. Linda continued to call, but neither of them answered or even listened to the voicemail, and wasn't sure how she would get a hold of them. She had also been calling Dan, but he wouldn't pick up and hadn't returned any of her calls either. Finally, at wit's end, she went down to the police station on Friday afternoon to file a missing persons report. She walked up to the duty desk and said, "My daughter has run away and I want to file a missing persons report and request your help in finding her." The officer on charge started to take her information, and when he got her name, daughter's name, husband's name and address, he asked her to wait a few minutes, and he walked into the back offices. After a few minutes, Jack Wilson, the DA for the district, walked out and introduced himself. He led Linda to an interview room and asked her to take a seat. "Mrs. Jacobs, my name is Jack Wilson, and I am a friend of your husband, Jimmy. I want you to know that Molly is fine. She is with Jimmy, and he called me and said you might be down to file a missing persons report. I have an agreement with him that I would give him through the weekend to make contact with you before taking any action on the missing person report. Molly is with him, they are both safe, and that is all I can tell you at this time. He will be in contact, and if he isn't by Monday morning, call me and I'll initiate police action." With that, he handed her his card and showed her out. She could feel his accusing looks and lack of respect as he got up and led her to the exit. She guessed that Jimmy had told him the story, and she decided she would get nowhere trying to argue the point. Jimmy had a lot of friends, and they would have his back. She walked out to her car, got in, and started to cry again. Back at the Hilton, Jimmy looked at Molly and said, "Well, I guess we at least need to talk with your mom and tell her you are okay. Do you want to talk to her?" Molly replied, "No, Dad. I don't think I ever want to talk to her again. I can't think of any reason I would accept for what she has done. And I can't think of any apology that would be acceptable. How would you even know she was telling you the truth? How could you ever trust her again? Molly, we are hurt and in shock and feeling betrayed right now. But time will lessen that hurt. And we will have to decide if we want to move on or try and fix the family. I think maybe we should drive over to the house, give her a chance to be truthful about the affair, and then decide. We at the very least need more clothes and toiletries if we are going to continue to stay at the hotel. And you also need to go back to school Monday, so you need to get your backpack and books and get ready for that. Tell you what, today is Sunday. Let's drive over there and give her a chance to tell her side of the story, and then we will decide to stay or to grab our things and leave. I think we owe her the chance to be truthful and tell us what, why, where, how long, etc." Molly and Jimmy drove up to the house on Sunday morning and walked in the front door. It was quiet and dark in the house, except for the kitchen. They walked into the kitchen and Linda was sitting at the island, drinking coffee and staring into her cup. She looked like she had aged 10 years since he had last seen her. Her face was puffy with blotches of red. Her eye makeup has been partially washed away with tears and she hadn't cleaned it off or replaced it. Her hair was a mess, uncombed and unwashed. When she looked up and saw them, she immediately jumped off her chair and ran around the island and tried to run to Molly and give her a hug. Molly threw up her arms and pushed her back, and then walked around to the opposite side of the island, avoiding contact with her mom. Jimmy did the same. Jimmy said, "Linda, we are back to have a discussion with you on what you did and why you think you did it. You have put both of us in immense pain, ripped away our love and trust in you. And I don't know if there is any coming back from what Molly saw and what she recorded on that video. I want to at least give you a chance to tell your side of the story." Linda was lightly crying and her nose was running. She grabbed a Kleenex, wiped her eyes, and blew her nose and looked at both of them. "I'm so sorry. Please know it wasn't anything about either of you. I love you both more than life, and I don't want to lose you. It was only sex. It didn't mean anything. That was the first and only time it happened, and it will never happen again. We can get past this. Don't throw our marriage away over a one-time mistake and meaningless sex." She looked away as she told the lie. And when she looked back, she could see that Jimmy was ready to explode in anger. Looking at Molly, Jimmy said. Molly left the kitchen and went up to her room to pack her clothes and personal items and grab her backpack. After Molly left the room, Jimmy looked at Linda and yelled, "So you are going to use all the standard lines instead of telling me the truth? It was only meaningless sex. It didn't mean anything. Oh, and by the way, you're about full of crap. How that was the first and only time really shows me that you have no problem with lying and deceiving us. I talked to Dan, and I know that it has been going on for 10 weeks, and I cannot unsee that video image where you were totally into screwing him and belittling me while you did it. So now who do I believe is lying, you or Dan? I know it is you, and I know that I'm not going to get any truth or understanding from talking to you. I told Dan that he is dead to me, and I'll never see or talk to him again. It's not quite as easy to do that with you, but at this point that is how I am feeling. And don't talk to me about throwing away our marriage over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake. It was an ongoing affair that you wouldn't have stopped if Molly hadn't walked in on you. And you seem to be only feeling bad about the fact you got caught, not the fact that you betrayed and disrespected your family, and did it with my brother, and in my bed no less. So don't talk to me about throwing away the marriage when you threw it away the first time you started to flirt and have an emotional and then sexual relationship with Dan. How do you think your 15-year-old daughter can ever deal with what she saw you two doing? I could just as soon choke you to death as look at you right now." With that, Jimmy spun on his heels and ran upstairs to the master bedroom. Linda crumpled to the floor, sobbing. She thought she could help her case by lying about how long the affair had been going on and trying to tell him that it was meaningless and he should forgive her. She had never seen him so mad and was now wondering if there was even a chance to reconcile with her husband and her daughter. She was shocked by the pain and hurt she saw in both of their faces. But how could she have not understood that this is what her betrayal would cause? Minutes later, Molly and Jimmy came down with suitcases filled. Jimmy took off his wedding ring and laid it on the counter, and without a word, they walked out. Linda just stayed on the kitchen floor, crumpled into a ball, crying. Jimmy and Molly went back to the Hilton, but Jimmy got online and started to look at apartments that would be both close to school and not too far from his offices. He called a few rental agencies, and by the end of the day, he had secured a 6-month lease on a fairly new 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment with a landscaped pool and spa area, BBQ grills and tables, and a workout room. The next morning, Jimmy dropped Molly off at school and came back and checked out of the hotel and moved their limited wardrobe and items to the apartment. He told Molly he would be home when she got there. It was only a 6-block walk from the school, so she could go ahead and attend her after-school sports and walk home when practice was done. Jimmy went into work and immediately called his financial planners and started the ball rolling on separating his pre-tax savings, checking, and joint accounts into one account in his name only and one account in Linda's name only. He then got a hold of a reputable divorce attorney that he knew had a very good reputation and set up a meeting for the afternoon. He then called in the CFO and the corporate lawyer from his law office and asked them to start working on how he could protect his ownership as a partner in the firm and how he could minimize any distribution of after-tax Roth and pre-tax 401k savings to his wife. His planners called him back and said since he had set up some college funds for his daughter, he could take a very large portion of his joint savings and investment accounts and put that into trust for her college funding, and it wouldn't be available as part of any divorce settlement. He also changed his insurance beneficiary to Molly only, and he set up his parents with guardian rights for his daughter should anything happen to him before she reached her 18th birthday. 10 days later, the divorce strategy and all of his financial adjustments were ready to go. He told his lawyer to go ahead and start on the divorce papers, but not to serve them until they heard from Jimmy. During this last 10 days, Linda had been calling and texting both Molly and Jimmy begging to talk, begging to go to family counseling, and begging them to come home. Jimmy had instructed security at his offices that she was not to be allowed on the property. Molly had gone to the vice principal at school and told him the situation and convinced him that she shouldn't be allowed on school property. Right around this time, Molly heard from Linda's parents. They called her and left a voicemail that confused Molly. Basically, it said that they didn't know why Molly and Jimmy were treating their daughter so badly over a minor disagreement. And how could they be so cruel as to move out and not talk to her? Molly decided to call Jimmy's parents and see if they had heard anything. She got on the phone with them and said, "Hi Grandma, how are things going? Have you been in contact with the family and what's new? I know we haven't seen you for a few weeks." They said that nothing was really new. They were just waiting for Dan and Amanda to have their baby. They said Dan and Amanda were coming over for brunch this coming weekend, and wondered if Linda, Jimmy, and Molly wanted to come over. Molly quickly figured out that no one in the family really knew what was happening. Obviously, Linda hadn't told her own parents the real truth, and apparently Dan never had a discussion with Amanda or his parents, unless they were incredibly forgiving. Jimmy got a call from Linda's sister Sherry scolding him for taking Molly and leaving Linda for such a minor reason as a disagreement about Molly's school activities and friends. "How could you be so cruel, Jimmy? It doesn't sound like you at all." Jimmy just said that there were issues between Linda and him and they were personal and would take time to work out. 20 minutes after that call, Linda's parents called with basically the same message. How could you be so cruel to walk out on some minor arguments and disagreements? And at the end of the evening, Jimmy's parents called and asked if Linda, Jimmy, and Dan would come over for brunch. Jimmy asked if Dan and Amanda were fine, and if Dan had talked to them at all. They said that Dan said Jimmy was mad at him for not returning his tools, and that they had a fight about it and weren't talking. Jimmy's mom said, "Come on, Dan, grow up. You can't have a fight with family about something as minor as missing tools. You come over this weekend and make up. Besides, we haven't talked to Linda or Molly for a long time." Jimmy made up an excuse that Molly had an out-of-town soccer game and they wouldn't be able to attend. Molly could see that Jimmy was trying to take the high road, but Linda or Dan hadn't been truthful to anyone about what was really going on. Molly looked over at him and said, "Well, it's obvious that neither Linda or Dan has told anything close to the real story to the family and you are getting the blame." She was mad, but her dad just shrugged and said, "Things will work themselves out." 2 weeks later, after a lot of soul-searching, self-analysis, and discussions with Molly, Jimmy decided that the love for Linda, the hurt at being betrayed, the deceit, and not owning up to the failure to keep her wedding vows was too much for him to forgive. It was obvious she hadn't taken any responsibility for what she had done with her family, and neither had Dan. He decided it was over, so he went ahead and asked his lawyers to serve Linda the divorce papers. Linda was sitting at home trying to decide what strategy she could use to get Jimmy and Molly back home so she could work on rebuilding her relationship. She knew she had hurt them, but she still was rationalizing to herself that it was only meaningless sex, and it was over, and things could return to normal. She had told herself that they would miss her in return, and when they did, she would be the most loving wife and mother that she could be. As she was thinking through how she could get Jimmy to talk with her, she heard a car pull up, and moments later a knock at the door. She looked through the window and saw a young man in a suit looking back at her. She opened the door, and he said, "Are you Linda Jacobs?" Worrying that maybe something had happened to Molly or Jimmy, she said, "Yes, I am. Is everything all right?" The young man handed her a manila folder and said, "Mrs. Jacobs, you have been served." He quickly snapped a photo of her with the packet and then turned and walked back to his car. Linda wasn't sure what he was talking about and went into the living room, sat on the couch, and opened the envelope. She pulled out the documents and saw, her eyes teared over, she dropped the documents, and for the first time, she really understood that she had likely thrown away her marriage and her family for some lousy sex. A few days after Linda received the petition for divorce, Jimmy started to get calls from all sides of the family. Linda's parents called and demanded how Jimmy could take away her child, move out, and divorce his wife, all for a minor set of disagreements and arguments. "Don't destroy your marriage because you two are arguing about raising your daughter the right way. Get together and work it out." Then he got a call from his parents. "Jimmy, what are you doing? Linda says that you are now divorcing her and won't speak to her, and you are keeping her daughter from her. She said you are just having a rough spot in your marriage, and that she loves you and wants to get her family back. Jimmy, this doesn't seem like you. It seems very harsh for just a series of arguments and disagreements." Then Jimmy's brother's wife Amanda called and scolded him. "Jimmy, how can you quit talking to Dan about arguments over tools? And how can you possibly think about divorcing Linda for such minor reasons? You need to get some help, Jimmy. Maybe some counseling." Jimmy tried to ignore it all, and his standard line on the phone was that this was a very personal matter between Linda, Molly, and himself, and they should go back and ask Linda if they wanted to really understand why there would be no reconciliation and why a divorce was the only way forward for him. But that didn't work. He kept getting calls. Then they started calling Molly with the same lines and urging her to go back home and be with her mother, whose heart was broken. Molly saw the pain this was putting Jimmy, and how he was now being cast as the bad guy by the entire family. She could plainly see that Dan had never told anyone the true story, and blamed his issues with Jimmy on losing some of Jimmy's tools. Molly could see that Linda was trying to garner all the family resources to talk Jimmy and Molly back. But to gain their support, she had never owned up to what she did, and had never told them the real story. She knew Jimmy never would, that he would let all of his relationships be poisoned by Linda's betrayal. and that he was too ethical to spread the dirt and real truth that would ruin Linda's relationships. But Molly had enough. One day during study hall at school, she pulled out her computer and composed an email to the whole family. It read, "To all of the family that is so quick to blame my dad for all the problems between my mom and us, and between Dan and him. It is very painful to send you the attached video. And I know it is going to shock and hurt you all, like it did to me when I walked into this nightmare and recorded it. It is extremely unfair that Jimmy should be punished by the family for something that he didn't do. He was betrayed by his wife, his brother, and now by his family. I've had enough. Please view this and ask yourself, what would you do if you were in my dad's situation? What would you do in my situation? What would you do when the two people that you thought loved you and would protect you and would always be on your side betrayed you in the most horrible way and continue to lie about it and not take responsibility for it? Please view the attached video in private. And then you can talk all you want to my mom and Uncle Dan about how Jimmy should respond." With that, she copied the entire family, her dad, who she knew would be mad, but she felt a duty to support, and she also copied Linda and Dan. Then, with her original anger and pain coming back to her, she pushed the send button. Linda had been at work and didn't see the personal email, and she had her phone off at work. As he went out to the parking lot and got in her car at the end of the day, she turned on her phone, hoping to see any response from Jimmy to her by daily calls pleading for forgiveness, pleading to let her explain, pleading for him to come home and talk. Instead, she saw missed calls from her parents, from Amanda, and from Jimmy's parents. She first listened to the voicemail from Amanda. "You cheater. Not only did you ruin Jimmy's life with your dirty affair with Dan, but you too also ruined my life. I never want to talk to you again. And I'll be Jimmy's strongest witness if possible at the divorce. He treated you with respect and love and did everything with his family in mind. And you threw it away with your cheap behavior. Maybe Dan wants to come over and stay with you cause he's getting kicked out of here tonight." Linda didn't really understand if Dan had confessed or what had happened, but she had a sinking feeling that the family knew what had really happened. The next voicemail was from her mom saying, "Linda, how could you? I was so disgusted and revolted watching that video. And with Jimmy's brother of all people and in your marriage bed." And then poor Molly walks in and witnesses her mother and uncle in a disgusting betrayal of her husband, herself, and the whole family. "How could you?" With that, she started to sob and hung up. Linda slumped down in her driver's seat and cried. She opened up her email on her iPhone and saw the email from Molly. She didn't want to open the video, as she was pretty sure she knew exactly what it was, but she did so just to witness how it would look from the rest of the family's point of view. It wasn't only the revolting sexual acts, but again, she heard her and Dan loud and clear. Linda knew it was all over. Her attempts to get her family to help get Jimmy to talk to her and reconsider were gone forever. What was she thinking? More lies, more disrespect, and not owning up to her actions were perhaps as bad as the illicit affair itself. She realized she was just kidding herself. There was no coming back from this, not with Jimmy. He was too hurt, too disrespected, and she realized that she had forever lost any close and loving connection to her daughter. She no longer had the right to even act as a parent to her. Any advice or guidance she gave her would be a hypocritical joke. She cried for an hour in the parking lot before she could even start her car and drive back home. 3 weeks later, Jimmy's lawyer called and told her that since she hadn't signed and returned the divorce documents, that he had scheduled a court hearing and it would be 2 weeks from now. He suggested she get a lawyer and get prepared. Linda got a divorce attorney on advice of a friend of hers that had cheated on her husband and gone through a divorce. She was honest and open with the lawyer on what she and Dan had done and how she had gotten to this point. After reviewing the documents, the lawyer told her, "Your husband is being fairly generous in that it is a 50-50 split on everything. It doesn't appear he is hiding any monies or trying to leverage you in any way by releasing the video. Except for one thing. He is asking for 100% custody of your daughter. That is very rarely granted by a judge. So at this time, I guess we just go to court, reject that part of the divorce petition, and leave it up to the judge." When they appeared in court, it was the first time she had seen Molly or Jimmy for 8 weeks. They looked rested, and Molly looked older and more mature than Linda had remembered her. Neither Jimmy or Molly would even make direct eye contact, and when she tried to speak to them in the hallway before entering the court, they just turned and walked away. "I'm so sorry. Please don't hate me forever. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't bear to think you will hate me forever. If you could find it in your heart to at least nurture any kind of relationship, I would be so thankful." With that, they walked into the court, and the proceedings began, and was ready to rule the standard 50-50 custody setup. At that point, Jimmy's lawyer looked at Molly and said to the judge, "Your Honor, before you fully decide, my client's daughter has asked to approach the bench and have a quick discussion with you." The judge replied that this was highly unusual, but given her age, I'll allow it. Molly came forward, and both of the lawyers also approached the bench to listen. Molly said to the judge, "Please, Your Honor, I don't want to live with my mother. She has damaged our relationship beyond repair. If you award her any custody, I can tell you honestly that I will run away. I wanted to stay a night in her home. I want to ask you to look at this short video and understand that this is what I walked into one day when I came home early from school. The man in the video is my uncle, my dad's brother. This had been going on for 3 months and probably would not have ended if she hadn't been caught." With that, she started the video and handed the judge her phone. His demeanor and body language changed as he watched the video play out. He handed the phone back and asked them all to return to their seats. He said, "I'm going to grant 100% custody to the father per the petition. Therefore, there will be no child support from the father, and due to his salary, I will not ask the mother to pay any child support either. I am going to rule that the mother gets a weekly 2-hour visit with the daughter. The first 6 months of the visit will be at a counseling session, which the father will pay for. He is invited, but his attendance is not mandatory. This counseling will be an attempt to see if the mother and daughter can forge a relationship for the good of their future lives." With that, the judge dismissed the courtroom, got up, and left for his chambers. Linda bent over the table and cried at the decree of 100% custody to Jimmy. But at least she had a faint glimmer of hope that with a counselor help, she might be able to initiate some kind of relationship with her daughter and possibly Jimmy. It was all she now had to look forward to in life, and she desperately wanted to at least make sure her daughter knew that she loved her, and knew that not only had she hurt Molly, Jimmy, and the entire family, but she had also ruined her life in the process. No one was without pain, and perhaps the worst pain and hurt that Linda's affair had initiated was her own. Epilogue: 1 year later, the counseling sessions with Linda and her daughter Molly were somewhat successful. Linda had been able to understand better why she might have done what she did, and she felt that Molly was able to understand it through the work that the counselor did. That wasn't to say that Molly could necessarily forgive it or ever justify it, but she could clearly see that Linda was in as much or perhaps more pain than Jimmy and her. Molly realized that despite all that had transpired, she did love her mother, and she did begin to spend the occasional weekends living at her apartment and spending time with her. Linda had learned to treat Molly like an adult, let her make her own decisions, and not ever criticize her for those decisions. They both knew if nothing else, they would be friendly in their future lives with each other. Linda would continue to apologize until one day, Molly said to just let it go, put it in the past, and let's never speak of it again. Linda would try and pull any information about Jimmy from her that she could, like how he looked, if he was dating, if he seemed happy. Molly could see that Linda still loved him very much, but she knew that Jimmy would never find it in his heart to trust her or be able to love her again. So Molly never encouraged her mom to dwell on Jimmy, encouraged her to start dating and look for a new beginning in her life. Jimmy never attended any of the counseling sessions. He was able to rekindle his relationship with his parents, and he had a close relationship to Amanda and her kids. She had left Dan and was rebuilding her life. Jimmy, true to his word, never responded to any of Dan's or his parents' attempts to get him to reconcile with Dan. Jimmy would not show up. Jimmy hadn't spoken to or seen Dan in a year and still was comfortable in his decision to never see or talk to Dan again. Jimmy had poured himself into his relationship with Molly first and worked secondly during the past year. He had not dated nor did he go out with the guys and party. Molly was encouraging him to get a life and start to date, and she felt that maybe he was getting close to joining the dating scene again. Linda would look back on her actions and still kick herself for what she had done. A 10-week affair of meaningless sex. Thrilling for the moment, but disastrous to the lives of anyone she really cared about. The guilt and the pain that she had caused through her actions never would leave her. She tried to deal with the depression and guilt by being a better mother, a better daughter, a better friend, and a better employee in all of her relationships, but she knew her life would never be what it once was, or would have been. Actions in life have consequences, and she had been stupid enough not to consider any of them when her lust and cheap thrill of illicit sex took over her. She had thrown away the best life she could have had for herself. She had pushed her daughter into the realities of adult pain and problems far earlier than what she would have ever hoped for her. And she had thrown away the love, trust, partnership, and joy that she had with her family, and knew she would never experience that again. Second story, Pregnant and Betrayed. Worth the read. I am now blessed with my almost 2-year-old son, but the journey here was one of the most challenging experiences of my life. Let's go back to 2020. I discover I'm pregnant with my then boyfriend's baby, and the excitement is palpable. Unfortunately, I lose the baby in September 2020. Aaron's absence during the grieving period after our loss is beyond words. About 4 weeks later, I catch him texting his coworker, Nicole, someone I always had suspicions about, despite seeing the messages he accidentally opened next to me. He gaslights me and makes me feel crazy. He never owns up, and I decide to leave him. Fast forward a few months, and we cautiously start to work things out. He confesses to having had relations with Nicole during our breakup, despite her being married with 2 kids. Nevertheless, we decide to work through it. They continue working together, but he promises to do everything he can to fix the situation, even applying for new jobs to avoid working with her. I begin to feel confident that everything is on track, and I no longer feel threatened. May 2021, I discover I am pregnant again, and this time, it's our now almost 2-year-old son. I am overjoyed and incredibly grateful. November 2021, Aaron starts becoming distant, but the good news is that in the next month or 2, he'll be starting a new job where he won't have to work with Nicole anymore. End of November, December, Aaron becomes even more distant. He fails to show affection, verbally or physically, and neglects my love language of touch and words of affirmation. He barely pays attention to my growing belly. Despite his emotional distance, I try to keep my spirits up for the holidays and to not cause stress to the baby. May 2021, the joy of discovering my pregnancy with our now almost 2-year-old son overwhelms me with gratitude. November 2021, a shift occurs as Aaron becomes increasingly distant. The silver lining is that, in the next month or 2, he'll start a new job, distancing himself from Nicole. End of November, December, Aaron's emotional distance deepens. Affection, both verbal and physical, becomes scarce, neglecting my love language of touch and words of affirmation. Despite this, I strive to maintain holiday cheer to avoid adding stress to the pregnancy. January 2022, communication dwindles further, and intimacy becomes a rarity. Feeling isolated, I focus on the impending arrival of my baby with growing excitement. February 2022, the long-awaited day approaches. In induced labor for 3 days, Aaron continues his detached behavior, seeking solace outdoors. My nurses provide more support than he does, given the COVID restrictions allowing only him in the room throughout the stay. 3 days later, our son arrives, placed on my chest, filling me with love and awe. Anticipating acknowledgement from Aaron, I'm met with silence. April 2022, our son is now 2 months old, and Aaron's emotional distance persists. We coexist as roommates sharing a child. His lack of involvement during work hours raises concerns, prompting a friend to suggest the possibility of infidelity. Investigating phone records reveals extensive communication with Nicole, dating back to November, December, leaving me sickened. Without confrontation, I retreat to bed with my son as Aaron occupies the couch. The next morning, I leave, taking everything I can with my son. I reach out to Nicole's husband, Chad, and the revelations continue. Surprisingly, Aaron's new job aligns with Nicole's recent employment. He transitioned from working with her to collaborating with her at another location, concealing the truth from me. Reviewing phone records during my 4.5-day hospital stay, I discovered that Aaron was in constant communication with her, even within hours after our son's birth, an unfathomable betrayal. The situation deteriorates further when I learn about Aaron's rendezvous with Nicole on his birthday. Just 2 weeks after our son's arrival, they engaged in an intimate encounter in the new car I helped him obtain just 3 months prior. I, preoccupied with a newborn and still recovering from childbirth, felt remorseful for not commemorating his birthday. In an attempt to salvage the occasion, he allowed me to buy him dinner. To compound the shock, the aftermath of their liaison resulted in Nicole's pregnancy, ending in a heartbreaking miscarriage. The magnitude of this betrayal surpasses any conventional understanding. Aaron not only cheated on me but also on our son, showing emotional and physical absence throughout the entire pregnancy experience. Questions arise about the moral compass of individuals who knowingly engage in affairs, particularly with someone expecting a child with another partner. Nicole's awareness of my previous miscarriage adds another layer to her character. I wonder if those who commit such acts experience any sense of guilt or shame. Despite almost 2 years passing, the emotional struggle persists. This is not a plea for sympathy, but a much-needed venting of my experience. Recognizing the difficulty others face in hearing stories about my son's father, I appreciate anyone who has navigated through this challenging narrative. As of now, Aaron and Nicole remain together, and Chad is still married to Nicole. The reality of this situation seems stranger than fiction.